Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, a lot of the story we're going to tell in this forecast video is actually being played out nicely here in this satellite animation, which began about 10 o'clock yesterday, midday, and ran through early this morning. We have a large storm system that is moving into the Pacific Northwest, brought some locally heavy rainfall. That will eject onto the upper plains here as we get into the day on Friday, increasing the severe weather threat for the Dakotas. Meanwhile, the previous system dragged a front through parts of the UP of Michigan, stretching through Wisconsin, Iowa, back over into parts of Nebraska, where some very locally heavy rain and some severe weather was seen last night. In fact, early this morning, storms still cranking out. But the bigger story, I think, is going to be the interaction of what's left over from Imelda, which is down there in parts of eastern Texas, producing some extremely heavy rain over parts of eastern Texas, really around the Houston area. And we're going to talk about how all of this is going to be pushed around by a ridge that's sitting over the southeast. So let's get into it and just take a look at what our all hazards weather map is picking up on. First of all, where's our main flood threat for today? Well, it's along that boundary where the overnight thunderstorms kind of stalled out in this area, some locally very heavy rainfall. And then, of course, where Imelda is going here over the last 48 hours, still producing some major flooding, the likes of which some folks down there haven't seen since Hurricane Harvey. Meanwhile, there is a critical risk of fire out here in parts of the southwest. We'll talk about that in a few moments. And look at this, some of our first areas outside of the mountains where we are seeing the risk for frost and freeze early this morning. We're going to talk about that in a few moments as well. Those overnight storms, again, stretching along that boundary right in through here. You can see some of the active lightning early this morning. Putting it together, there's about 18,000 lightning strikes over a 2-hour time period stretched into this area. You can also see Imelda here. And what I want to stress in this video is that we're going to continue to see fronts stall as they try to press to the south. They're going to be prevented from moving much farther to the south by this big area of higher pressure. So initially, Imelda is going to work on that front, but we have more systems in play that are going to come after it as well. So this is an area that I'm targeting to be very wet over the coming days here. So let's just take a look at the last 72 hours. Some locally heavy rain out in the Pacific Northwest as that next of our systems that's kind of been all lined up in the North Pacific made its way on shore here. So we can see over the last 3 days, some locations, especially on the windward side of the mountains here, picking up well over an inch of rainfall. Outside of that, some locally heavy rain in parts of Iowa, in Nebraska, and you can see here the flooding problems that we are certainly having down in parts of Texas around Houston. We are off my chart here in terms of total accumulated, and my chart ends at 10 inches. So 3 days greater than 10 inches, that's impressive. Well, this is moving north. Boundaries will be stalling here. Ridge over the southeast, parade of storms coming in this direction. So I expect it to stay wet here, and very dry down here. Take a look at it, all right? Last 14 days, we can see this is a wash, rinse, repeat of the same thing. We are off my chart over 200% of normal rainfall in this corridor. And why? Storm track has come in and lifted toward the northeast. So we can see that some entire states have had more than double their average rainfall just in the last 14 days here. What's going on though? It's going to be this area, which has got a little bit of a reprieve from rainfall over the last couple of weeks, that's going to get hammered. And as Imelda moves up into this part of Texas, Arkansas and Oklahoma are going to hit heavy rain here first, but it's really going to be concentrated right in this area. Unfortunately, the southeast is going to stay on the dry side of things for a while due to that big high pressure cell, but I do have some news for you over here in parts of the desert southwest. Some tropical moisture coming up out of the East Pacific we need to be seeing here as well. So here's just your next 5 days. I want to show you just the next 5 days. It all kind of plays out. Storm track doing this. Boundaries stalling here. We're expecting in this corridor maybe an additional 2, 3, 4 inches of rainfall. Imelda is still not done in parts of eastern Texas as it moves to the north. And again, not much rain over here in the Carolinas, getting over into parts of the southeast. Big area of high pressure sitting in place in that area. And we're going to talk in a minute about what I'm expecting to come in over here. Still, the Pacific Northwest storm system's coming down in that direction. That's what we're expecting. Now, what's causing all of this? Well, that ridge I keep detailing for you over the southeast, when we just step up in the atmosphere about 1.5 miles, we can see what it's doing toward the end of this week, just pumping moisture into the middle part of the United States. And as it does this, out ahead of this next low that's emerging in this area, this is going to really increase our severe weather risk on Friday right in through this corridor. But as this low pressure system heads on in this direction, it's going to leave a frontal boundary right in through here. And I'm drawing it as a cold front, but it's going to stall out. It'll be stationary. but the moisture keeps pumping into it, and that's where we're going to see the heavier rains out of this system. So that's our breakdown in the near term here. One thing to point out, I do want to kind of show you this highlighted map in the bottom right-hand corner. We do have an elevated risk in through this area and a critical risk in through here. See these stronger winds over in this area for later in the day today? Those strong winds combined with very low humidity is going to increase our fire threat in that area. So keep a close eye on it here over the next 24 hours. Storm Prediction Center is highlighting a few regions later on today. Yes, the storms early this morning are still in through this area, but as we move into that more stable mid-morning time period, we are expecting some of the storms to weaken a little bit, even though they're still producing some very heavy rain. Later in the day on Thursday, it's going to be watching these two areas as our next system kind of curls its way up out here in the Intermountain West, and it's going to draw plenty of moisture in, so I'm going to watch the high plains later this afternoon and this evening for storms. As this system then fully emerges here as a low-pressure system right on the U.S.-Canada border, the frontal boundary out ahead of it is one I'm going to be watching for some severe weather on Friday. And as that system continues to progress toward, through Ontario toward Quebec, frontal boundary stretching right in through here, so we're going to watch this whole area for more severe weather as we get into the day on Saturday. So that's what our Storm Prediction Center is picking up on. We can see that played out nicely here with our NAM model. So this is a high-resolution NAM running out just the next 60 hours. So this will carry us out to early morning on Saturday. Let's step it back and watch some of the features again. Here's our overnight storms that move through Wisconsin and Iowa and parts of eastern Nebraska. So what I want to understand here is what are these storms doing in the very stable early morning air? And it appears that through early morning, so we're talking about 11, 12 o'clock, we're going to have to now cast our way through this to see which storms survive, but it does appear, I got from multiple models here, appears that this is going to break up. Now, meanwhile, while that's going on, here's our next major center of precip, Imelda, still moving north, bringing rain to places that haven't seen it in a couple of weeks. And our storm system is emerging out of the Intermountain West. So watch as it get to 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now we're getting into the evening hours on Thursday. So again, we're watching this corridor for the eruption of severe weather. So watch right over here in parts of southwestern Nebraska and western Kansas. We can still see what's going on with Imelda here, bringing in that moisture to the north. And as it does so, see this? These first two boundaries are going to start to interact. And that's what's going to enhance some of the rainfall in this area. Meanwhile, once we get into the day on Friday, watch the northern plains as the first system emerges. So in the afternoon and evening hours, look at the storms we're seeing kind of break out in the midsection of the United States, especially up here getting into the Dakotas. So this is late afternoon on Friday, while Imelda still here bringing widely scattered showers and storms through a big section of part of the Mississippi River Valley and extending back to the west of there. So that's Friday evening, and here's where the show really gets going. This is now 2 o'clock Saturday morning, getting into the early morning hours on Saturday. The front that we saw making all the severe weather in the Dakotas, we're going to watch this on Saturday drape through this area and stall out. And it's best to show you that by switching over to a longer range model here. So we can watch this play out again because I want to get you right here. There we go. This is now Friday evening. That's where we're watching the severe weather to break out. And you're going to notice two things. See the high pressure cell sitting here over the southeast? That's funneling in the moisture. As this system moves towards the Hudson Bay, the funnel boundary will end up right in through here. Ready? So this is now Saturday morning, Saturday midday, Saturday evening. There it is. The front is now sitting right back into this area. And that's where we're going to continue to see more storms erupting on this boundary as we progress through the day on Saturday, into Sunday, and early into Monday. All fed on the flow around this high, pumping the moisture right into that area. Now, meanwhile, for Monday, here comes a pulse of tropical moisture that's going to come into the desert southwest. Remember I said we could get a push in there? Well, there it is. High pressure tries to build in Monday over the Great Lakes states, but what we're going to notice is another system is trying to emerge on Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. See that? So we're possibly bringing in Tuesday into Wednesday more heavy rain back into the same corridor. And stretching this out a little bit further, let's just get all the way out to next Thursday. We see our next big system coming into the northwest into Thursday, and it's again going to follow a very similar trajectory. Now, please understand, I'm way out here in the forecast. What I'm attempting to show you is The model's just not calming this one down. Very active pattern. So the best way to do this is look at the ensemble. And this is the week 2 ensemble. So we can see this region right in through here, that preferred storm track is what we're expecting to see, wetter than average conditions. Southeast protected largely by a ridge, and that is the setup for week 2. And I've got good model agreement between the European ensemble and the GFS here. Now, the upper level flow of the atmosphere is, again, relatively unblocked. I actually see quite a bit of movement in this. What we don't see are big, deep ridges moving into the eastern half of the United States. They're tending to stay out west. I mean, look at this. If I just take you back multiple times, this weekend, next week, midweek next week, we just continue to see more ridging happening outside of the northwest. It's happening on either side. See Gulf of Alaska, eastern half of the country. And this is preventing some real fall-like weather from coming in to the eastern half of the United States. It's keeping a lot of it out here in the west, so keep that in mind. But also keep this in mind. If the flow pattern's doing that, remember, this is the most active region, and that's why we see that storm track throughout the next 2 weeks setting up in that region. So let's see what this is now doing in terms of its interaction with the tropics. A couple of things to be paying attention to. We've talked about Imelda. I wanted you to know about Jerry as well. We can see that we're right now basically at the peak of hurricane season, and Hurricane Jerry is currently forecast by the National Hurricane Center to really be moved to the north around a ridge that's a bigger ridge that's going to be sitting out here in the mid-North Atlantic. We'll expect it to get to hurricane strength and again, stay north of the Lesser Antilles. But there's something I want to show you that came out last night from the European ensemble. While most of the European ensemble members keep this out in open ocean, maybe take it over Bermuda, we did see emerge here a few ensemble members that kind of get trapped under a smaller ridge here, pushing it off in this direction with time. And therefore there is potential, although it's a very low probability event here, that some of the tracks, by the time we start talking about this again on Monday and Tuesday of next week, we'll have to see if any of these tracks hold any water here as being a viable solution for the potential track of Jerry. Right now, the best model agreement is this system stays away from the United States. Now, turning our attention towards temperature, I want to show you something I discussed in my long-range update yesterday. This was the forecast for October 1st. In each image you see flashing in front of you here is a different forecast from the GFS, but it's all for the same day. We're looking at something called deprog-DT, the change in prognosis for the exact same time. And when we watch this, we can see a lot of variability. For example, those 2 runs right there brought in a lot of very cold air and potentially a first big frost, but you can see here that following model runs warmed it right back up. This is why anytime beyond day 7 we don't use operational model forecasts for temperatures. We combine climatology with the ensemble to know what's going on. So what's climatology tell us? Well, we've bought some time here in the north central part of the United States. Normally by the end of September, we've had our first frost. We've got a timely first frost here in parts of the far northeast. But outside of that, much of the midsection of the country has really bought some time here at the end of the season. So take a look at our low temperatures. Here we have on Thursday, our frost threat is here. We saw that earlier in the all hazards weather map. Playing this one forward, let's just see how temperatures evolve here. This is getting into the day on Friday, overnight low temperatures, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We get all the way to the 24th of the month, and we barely see overnight lows here in the 40s or upper 30s at any given time. So this is certainly some warmth hanging on to the end of the season here. Why? Deeper troughs tends to sit out west. This is pumping a lot of heat right in the middle section of the country. We saw that earlier. We do have a little backdoor cold front that's been sneaking through over the last couple of days, moving through the Carolinas, cooling things off there though. But look out today 6 through 10. That's the map that's over here on the right. We continue to see above average temperatures in this area as our storm track really keeps lifting to the north and east rather than digging through the middle part of the country. But the only place it's seen real fall-like weather is out in the Pacific Northwest. Taking you all the way out to day 11 through 15, we still see much of the same. That preferred storm track is here, so the trough digs in and then lifts in that direction, and therefore we keep on the warmer side of things in this part of the country. Now, to help us understand this frost threat, I've started generating a new product here. So the GFS model is actually run 21 separate times. So I get 21 separate forecasts each time it's run. What I'm going to overlay and shade together is where they produce temperatures below freezing each model run. So this is stretching us out over the next 16 days. We see that by the time we get into October, we start to get some sub-freezing temperatures, or higher probability of them, sneaking through the Canadian prairies. But what you noticed in this was that, let's just watch it again. You don't notice any time period where we get these big blasts of cold air that come down and occupy a big section of the United States. Honestly, when you start to see the frost probabilities getting above 50%, that tells me there's a pretty good chance that we'll see it. And it may not be until the beginning of October that we start to get a frost that would hit the northern parts of the United States. And again, that's quite late. All right. To finish this up, I want to give you a quick international update. I'm expecting a very active week this week in Europe, starting off cold in Eastern Europe, warm in Western, but we have this deeper trough that's sweeping through, very heavy rainfall through parts of France, getting into Germany, and points to the south of there, specifically right here through the Alps. So we need to be on the lookout for a lot of severe storms and some very heavy rainfall in that area. Meanwhile, over in China, this particular area showing up very dry in the forecast, and that's what we can see, our normal precipitation there. China's main growing areas staying drier than that. And it's interesting to note this because that area, especially here, the Shandong province, which is here south of Beijing, take a look at this. When we look back at the last 180 days, they have really built up a deficit in rainfall. They had a typhoon that came in here, bringing them way above average for a while, but then they flatlined on rainfall since. And you just saw in the background there, the next 10 days expected to be dry as well. So we have to see what that means for the quality of the corn and soybean crop coming out of that area. And finally, I want to talk to you a bit about what's going on in South America. What I have over here on the left-hand side is the correlation between Brazilian rainfall and velocity potentials deep in the atmosphere. In other words, this is the MJO. What we see here is that there's a positive correlation with positive velocities. Those would be ones where we see our positive velocities is more suppressive of precipitation in this area, okay? Where you see the blues, this is negative velocity potential. And so that means air is able to rise. So air is sinking here and rising here. Now, the point behind me telling you this is that right now, we see that over the next several days, our forecast to end September and begin October is to see more sinking air in this vicinity. And that's going to help bring up precipitation amounts in Brazil as they start to get out of the nasty drought. And that's why we see over the coming days, the Brazilian monsoon is expected to get a little bit of life, bringing in some rainfall, especially into this corridor, but also down in through these regions as well, near average in the middle part of the country here. So this is just important because we're trying to get out of that drought so that those folks can get a crop planted here, and we're just watching to see when the moisture comes in. But the MJO is constantly moving, so even though we got some early rainfall here, if they turn dry after the next 15 days, that could really prevent a lot of folks from trying to plant right now, and they might wait until the monsoon really gets going by the time we get into October. Okay, so I just want to give you that update on South America, and with that, I'll wrap up the forecast video right here. Hope you all have a great weekend. We Nutrien Ag Solutions hope you check out all of our forecasts next week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.